The crystal chandeliers sparkled like 1,000 stars above the crowded ballroom. Women in designer gowns glided across the marble floors, while men in expensive suits laughed over glasses of champagne that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. It was the kind of party you see in movies, the kind where everything gleams and everyone seems to belong to a different world, except for her. The young waitress moved carefully between the clusters of wealthy guests, her black and white uniform crisp and professional. Her name tag read Lily in small plain letters. She carried a silver tray loaded with delicate appetizers, the kind with fancy French names she'd had to practice pronouncing during training. Her feet ached in the required black heels, but she kept her posture straight and her smile polite. She'd been doing this job for almost 2 years now, and she knew the rules. Be invisible, be efficient, never make eye contact for too long. This particular mansion belonged to one of the city's wealthiest men, a real estate developer who owned half the buildings downtown. His name was Richard Blackwell, and everyone called him Rick. At 46 years old, he'd built his fortune buying struggling properties and flipping them for millions. Tonight's charity gala was one of his famous events, the kind that made the society pages and gave rich people a chance to feel good about themselves while showing off their wealth. Lily had worked dozens of these parties, but tonight felt different somehow. Maybe it was the size of the crowd, nearly 200 people packed into the massive ballroom, or maybe it was the grand piano sitting in the corner, its polished black surface reflecting the chandelier lights like a dark mirror. She'd been trying not to look at it all evening, but her eyes kept drifting back. "Excuse me, miss?" An older woman in pearls gestured for more champagne. Lily smiled and moved to refill her glass, then continued her rounds through the room. The other servers moved like shadows, experienced enough to anticipate what the guests needed before they asked. The catering company she worked for was one of the best in the city, which meant the standards were high and the pressure was constant. But it paid better than her other 2 part-time jobs, and right now she needed every dollar. Her younger brother was in his 2nd year of medical school across the country. Their parents had died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving Lily at 22 to figure out how to keep her 19-year-old brother's dreams alive. The insurance money had helped, but medical school was expensive, so she worked and worked and worked some more. Her brother didn't know about the 3 jobs. He thought the insurance money was stretching further than it actually was. She wanted to keep it that way. "This shrimp is divine," a woman exclaimed to her friend nearby. "Rick really knows how to throw a party." Speaking of Rick, the man himself stood near the piano, surrounded by his usual group of admirers. He was tall and tan, with silver threading through his dark hair in a way that probably cost a fortune to maintain at some expensive salon. His suit was custom-tailored, and his watch could have paid Lily's rent for a year. He laughed loudly at something one of his friends said, the kind of laugh that demanded attention. Lily had noticed something about very rich people over the past 2 years. Some of them were kind, almost embarrassed by their wealth. They said please and thank you, looked you in the eye, asked your name. But others, like Rick, seemed to view service workers as props in their lives, there for entertainment or convenience, but not quite real people. Rick was the type who snapped his fingers at servers and complained if his steak wasn't exactly medium rare. As she passed near his group, Lily heard one of the guests ask about the piano. "Oh, that old thing?" Rick waved dismissively. "It was here when I bought the place. Belonged to the previous owner's wife. She was some kind of concert pianist back in the day. I keep meaning to sell it, but it looks good in photos." A woman in a red dress ran her fingers along the piano's edge. "Does anyone even play it?" "Not that I know of," Rick said with a smirk. "Most of my friends prefer making money to making music." The group laughed, and Lily felt something twist in her chest. She moved away quickly, focusing on her work. A tray needed refilling in the kitchen. She had a job to do. But as she walked back through the service entrance, her mind stayed on that piano. She'd grown up with music. Her mother had been a piano teacher, not famous or wealthy, just someone who loved music and wanted to share that love with others. Lily had started lessons at age 5, and by the time she was a teenager, she was good. Really good. Good enough to get into one of the top music conservatories in the country with a full scholarship. That had been the plan. Graduate high school. Go to Juilliard. Become a professional pianist. She dreamed of concert halls and recording studios, of traveling the world and doing the things she loved most. Her mother had cried happy tears the day the acceptance letter arrived. Then came the accident. Suddenly, there were funeral costs and her brother's college tuition and a million other expenses. The scholarship was generous, but it didn't cover everything. And her brother's dream of becoming a doctor, their parents' dream for him, felt more important than her own ambitions. He was younger. He had more time. She could always go back to music later, she'd told herself. That was 3 years ago. She hadn't touched a piano since. Well, that wasn't entirely true. Sometimes late at night when she was cleaning apartments for her third job, if someone had a piano, she'd play a few notes, just enough to remember what it felt like. Then she'd stop, lock that part of herself away, and get back to work. When Lily returned to the ballroom with fresh appetizers, the party had reached that point where everyone was loose from champagne and the conversations were getting louder. Rick was holding court near the piano, telling some story that had his audience in stitches. She tried to stay on the opposite side of the room, but the other servers had that area covered. As she approached with her tray, she heard someone ask Rick about his hobbies. "I collect interesting experiences," he said grandly. "Anyone can buy things, but experiences? That's what life is really about." One of his friends, a woman with too much Botox and a bored expression, gestured lazily at the piano. "Well, here's an experience. Why doesn't someone play for us? Isn't that what it's here for?" "I don't know anyone who plays," Rick said, scanning the room with amusement. Then his eyes landed on Lily, who was serving canapes to a couple nearby. Something flickered across his face, something that made Lily's stomach drop even before he spoke. "Wait," he called out, loud enough that conversations around them stopped. "You there, miss? Come here for a moment." Lily's hands tightened on her tray. Every server's nightmare was being singled out at an event like this. It usually meant something had gone wrong, a mistake that would be your fault whether you'd made it or not. She approached carefully, keeping her expression neutral. "What's your name?" Rick asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Lily, sir. Lily. Beautiful name." He turned to his audience, that showman's gleam getting brighter. "I was just thinking, we have this magnificent piano here and it's such a shame no one's playing it. You wouldn't happen to play, would you, Lily?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Lily's mouth went dry. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, waiting. If she said yes, what would happen? If she said no, would that be the end of it? I studied a little, sir. A long time ago." Rick's smile widened. He was enjoying this now, she could tell. "Wonderful. Then you simply must play something for us. I insist." "Oh, I couldn't possibly, sir. I'm working and I haven't played in years and—" "Nonsense." He gestured broadly to his guests performing now. "Everyone, we're about to have a special treat. Our talented server Lily is going to entertain us with a piano performance." A few people clapped politely. Others whispered to each other, and Lily caught the smirks, the raised eyebrows. They knew exactly what Rick was doing. This wasn't about the music. This was about him showing off, having a laugh at the help's expense. "Look at the poor waitress who thinks she can play piano for people like us." Lily's face burned. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She looked at Rick's face, at the cruel amusement dancing in his eyes, and knew she had no choice. If she refused outright, she'd lose this job. The catering company's reputation depended on keeping clients like Rick happy. And she needed this job. Her brother needed this job. "I'm really not—" She tried once more. "I insist," Rick repeated, his voice firm now, the suggestion becoming a command. "We're all dying to hear you play." The room had fallen almost completely silent now, everyone turning to watch the scene unfold. Lily felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff about to fall. Her hands were shaking as she set down her tray on a nearby table. She walked toward the piano as if moving through water, each step heavy and surreal. Behind her, she heard whispers, a muffled laugh. Rick stood to the side, arms crossed, watching her with that same awful smile. The piano bench was cold when she sat down. The keys stretched out before her like a challenge, like a memory, like everything she'd given up 3 years ago. Her fingers hovered over them, trembling. This was it. The moment Rick expected her to fail, to fumble through something embarrassing while his rich friends laughed and felt superior about their own lives. The moment she was supposed to prove that people like her belonged serving drinks, not making music. Lily closed her eyes. She thought of her mother's hands guiding hers over these same keys when she was 5 years old. She thought of countless hours of practice, of recitals and competitions, and that acceptance letter from Juilliard. She thought of her brother studying late into the night, believing in his future because she'd sacrificed hers, and then she began to play. The first notes that came from the piano were soft, almost hesitant. Lily's fingers touched the keys like she was greeting an old friend she hadn't seen in years. For a moment, she felt every eye in the room boring into her back, felt the weight of Rick's cruel smile, heard the barely suppressed giggles from some of his friends. Then something shifted. Her fingers found their rhythm, and suddenly she wasn't in that ballroom anymore. She was 12 years old again, sitting beside her mother on a worn piano bench in their small living room. She could almost smell her mother's lavender perfume, hear her gentle voice saying, "Don't play the notes, sweetheart. Tell the story. Let the music speak." The hesitant notes grew stronger. Lily began playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most beautiful and technically challenging pieces in classical music. It was the piece she'd been preparing for her Juilliard audition, the last thing she'd played before her world fell apart. Within seconds, the atmosphere in the room changed completely. The snickering stopped first. Then the whispered conversations died away. Someone had been clinking their champagne glass, but that sound ceased too. The entire ballroom fell into a silence so profound that the only sound was the piano, singing through the space like it had been waiting years for someone to give it a voice again. Lily's hands moved across the keys with a precision that came from thousands of hours of practice, from a talent that had been sleeping but never truly gone. Her fingers danced through the complex passages, the left hand providing the deep, resonant bass notes while the right hand soared through the melody. But it wasn't just technical skill. Anyone with enough practice could hit the right notes. What Lily did was different. She poured everything into that piano. 3 years of exhaustion from working multiple jobs, the grief of losing her parents, the weight of responsibility for her brother's future, the sacrifice of her own dreams, the loneliness of pretending everything was fine when she was drowning. All of it flowed through her fingers into the music, transforming her pain into something heartbreakingly beautiful. A woman near the front of the crowd pressed her hand to her chest, her eyes filling with tears. She'd attended 100 concerts at the finest venues in the world, but she'd never heard anyone play with such raw emotion. An older man who'd been laughing at Rick's jokes minutes earlier now stood frozen, his champagne glass forgotten in his hand, completely transfixed. Rick's smile had vanished. He stood near the wall, his arms no longer crossed confidently but hanging at his sides. His face had gone pale. This wasn't what was supposed to happen. She was supposed to stumble through some simple tune, maybe Chopsticks or a clumsy version of Happy Birthday. The guests were supposed to laugh. He was supposed to make some witty comment about knowing one's place, and everyone would move on to the next entertainment. But this was not part of his plan. As the piece built toward its crescendo, Lily's playing became even more powerful. The piano seemed to shake with the force of the music. Her whole body moved with the rhythm, years of training evident in every gesture. This wasn't just a performance. It was a resurrection. She was playing for her younger self who'd dreamed of concert halls. She was playing for her mother who'd believed in her talent. She was playing for every time she'd walked past a music store and felt that ache of longing. And then she did something unexpected. Instead of finishing the Rachmaninoff piece in its traditional form, she transitioned seamlessly into her own improvisation. The classical structure remained, but she wove in elements of jazz, blues, and modern composition. Her professors at the conservatory had always praised this ability, her gift for taking established works and making them entirely her own, while respecting the original composer's vision. The music swelled and dipped, playful one moment and melancholic the next. Some guests found tears running down their carefully made-up faces without even realizing they were crying. Others stood with their mouths slightly open, completely stunned. A famous music critic who'd been dragged to the party by his wife grabbed her arm and whispered urgently, "Who is that? How have I never heard of her?" In the back of the room, the other servers had stopped working entirely, standing in a line watching their coworker with expressions of shock and pride. The head caterer, who'd been ready to have a heart attack when Rick singled out Lily, now leaned against the wall with her hand over her mouth, amazed. Rick's girlfriend, a woman named Claire who'd been giggling earlier when he'd called Lily over, now looked at him with something close to disgust. She'd always known Rick could be mean, but she told herself it was just confidence, just alpha male behavior. But watching him try to humiliate this young woman for cheap laughs Seeing his plan backfire so spectacularly, she suddenly saw him clearly. And she didn't like what she saw. The music began to wind down, the notes becoming softer again, gentler. Lily brought the improvisation back to the original Rachmaninoff melody, closing the circle she'd opened. Her hand slowed and the final notes hung in the air like the last rays of sunset, beautiful and bittersweet and somehow final. Then silence. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The moment felt suspended in time, crystallized and perfect. Then the applause erupted like thunder. It wasn't polite party clapping. This was a standing ovation, the kind usually reserved for professional performances at prestigious venues. People surged forward shouting, "Bravo!" and "Magnificent." Some were openly weeping. Others just shook their heads in disbelief, as if they'd witnessed something they couldn't quite explain. Lily stood up from the piano bench on shaky legs, overwhelmed and disoriented. She'd forgotten where she was for those few minutes, lost in the music. Now reality crashed back in. She was still in her server's uniform. These people were still strangers, and Rick was still standing there, though his face looked nothing like it had before. An elderly woman in a diamond necklace that probably cost more than a car pushed through the crowd with surprising energy. She grabbed Lily's hands, her own fingers trembling. "My dear girl," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Where did you study? How are you not performing professionally?" I went to the conservatory for a year," Lily managed to say. "I had to leave. Family reasons," the woman's eyes widened. "The conservatory? Which one?" "Juilliard. But I only completed 1 year before at Juilliard." The woman's grip tightened. "I'm Patricia Hammond. I'm on the board of the Metropolitan Orchestra. I remember your name from the scholarship applications 5 years ago. You won the Goldstein Award. Everyone was talking about you, and then you just disappeared from the program." Before Lily could respond, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s stepped forward. Despite the formal setting, there was something warm and approachable about his face. "Forgive me for interrupting," he said with a slight European accent. "I'm Vincent Laurent. I conduct the European Symphony Orchestra. That performance. I've heard professionals who couldn't touch what you just did. The technique was flawless, but more importantly, you have something that can't be taught. You have soul." More people crowded around, pressing business cards into Lily's hands. A talent agent, a recording studio executive, a concert promoter, someone from a prestigious music academy. They spoke over each other, making offers, asking questions, competing for her attention like she was already famous. Lily felt dizzy. Her head spun with the sudden onslaught of attention. These same people had been walking past her all night, invisible to them in her server's uniform. Now they looked at her like she was the most important person in the room. It was surreal and overwhelming and terrifying all at once. Through the crowd, her eyes found Rick. He stood alone now, his friends having drifted away to join the mob around Lily. His girlfriend had actually walked away from him entirely, standing on the other side of the room with her arms crossed. Rick's face was a mixture of emotions, shock and shame, and something that might have been regret. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a long moment, neither of them looked away. Lily saw something in his expression she hadn't expected. Not just embarrassment at his plan going wrong. Something deeper, something almost human beneath that polished exterior. Then someone asked her another question and she had to turn away. But that image stuck with her, the look on Rick's face. Vincent Laurent was explaining something about a European tour, how his regular pianist had just backed out due to a family emergency, how he'd been searching desperately for someone who could not only play technically, but who could connect emotionally with the audience. "You did in 5 minutes what some pianists never achieve in their entire careers," he was saying. "Please, you must consider it. I know this is sudden, but I have a job," Lily said softly, the reality of her situation creeping back in. "Actually, 3 jobs. I can't just leave." Patricia Hammond squeezed her hand. "My dear, after tonight, you won't need 3 jobs. You won't need any of those jobs. You need to be doing what you were clearly born to do." Lily looked down at the business cards in her hands, representatives from places she'd only dreamed about, opportunities that seemed impossible just 10 minutes ago. Her mind raced, trying to process it all, trying to figure out if this was real or if she'd wake up and find herself still serving canapes. The head caterer appeared at her elbow. her earlier panic replaced by a strange mixture of pride and concern. "Lily, honey, take your break. Take the rest of the night. I think you've done enough work for one evening." As the crowd finally started to disperse, still buzzing with excitement about what they'd witnessed, Lily slipped away to a quiet corner of the ballroom. She needed a moment to breathe, to think, to understand what had just happened. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her brother. "Hey sis, how's the fancy party? Bet it's boring, right? Love you. Studying late again tonight." Lily stared at the message, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Her brother, the reason for everything. What would he say about all this? What would happen now? She looked back at the piano, sitting quietly in the corner like it had done nothing remarkable. But it had changed everything. In trying to humiliate her, Rick had accidentally given her back something she'd thought was lost forever. The question was, what would she do with it? 3 days had passed since the party, and Lily still couldn't quite believe it had actually happened. She kept replaying it in her mind, wondering if she'd exaggerated the details or made them more dramatic than they really were. But then she'd look at the stack of business cards on her kitchen table, physical proof that something extraordinary had occurred. She was arranging flowers in a small vase, a grocery store bouquet she'd bought to cheer up her tiny apartment, when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw someone she never expected to see here. In her neighborhood where the buildings needed paint and the street parking was a constant battle, Rick Blackwell stood in her hallway, looking completely out of place. He wasn't wearing one of his expensive suits. Instead, he had on jeans and a plain button-down shirt like he'd deliberately tried to dress down. But his watch probably still cost more than her car, and there was no hiding the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. Lily considered not answering. She could pretend she wasn't home, but curiosity got the better of her. She opened the door but didn't invite him in, just stood there waiting to hear what he could possibly have to say. "Hi," Rick said. And he actually looked uncomfortable. Good, she thought. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now. I almost didn't come. I must have driven past your building 3 times before I got up the courage to park. How did you even get my address?" Lily asked, her voice flat. "The catering company. I told them I wanted to send you something." He held up his hands quickly. "I know how that sounds. I promise I'm not here to be creepy. I needed to talk to you in person." Lily crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. She didn't make this easy for him. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face, but another part was curious about what had brought one of the city's wealthiest men to her rundown apartment building. Rick took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology, a real one. Not the kind people give at parties where they don't really mean it. What I did the other night was cruel and inexcusable." He paused, struggling with the words. "I was showing off for people who don't actually matter. I tried to make myself feel superior by humiliating you, and there's no excuse for that." "No, there isn't," Lily agreed, not giving him an inch. "I've been thinking about it constantly since that night. Why did I do it? What made me think it was okay to treat another person like that?" Rick rubbed his face, looking genuinely troubled. "I started seeing a therapist 2 days ago. First session. She said I'm compensating for deep-seated insecurities by putting others down. Fancy way of saying I'm sometimes a terrible person." Despite herself, Lily felt a tiny crack in her anger. At least he was being honest. Most rich people she'd encountered would have sent some assistant with a fruit basket and called it even. "Do you know why I work 3 catering jobs?" Lily asked suddenly. "Why someone who went to Juilliard is serving appetizers at parties?" Rick shook his head. "My younger brother is in medical school. Our parents died 3 years ago in a car accident. I was 22, he was 19. I had a full scholarship to Juilliard, a whole future planned out. Concert halls, recordings, maybe teaching eventually. That was my dream." Her voice cracked slightly. "I gave it all up so my brother wouldn't have to give up his dream. Medical school is expensive. Someone had to pay for it." Rick's face had gone pale. "I didn't know." "I'm so sorry. Of course you didn't know. People like you never know anything about the people serving your drinks or parking your cars or cleaning your houses. We're invisible to you unless you want to use us for entertainment." The words came out harder than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. "You're right," Rick said quietly. "You're absolutely right, and I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I want to try to make it right. Not from me, I don't deserve your forgiveness. But because what you have, your talent, is too extraordinary to waste because of people like me. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and held it out. Lily stared at it suspiciously. It's not charity, Rick said quickly. Consider it payment for the performance. You gave my guests an experience they're still talking about. Half of them have called me asking how to contact you. One guy wants to hire you for his daughter's wedding and offered me a finder's fee. He managed a small, self-deprecating smile. I told him that would be inappropriate and gave him Patricia Hammond's number instead. She's been organizing everything, I think. Lily took the envelope carefully like it might explode. Inside was a check. When she saw the amount, her hands started shaking. It was enough to cover her brother's tuition for 2 years. Maybe more. I can't accept this, she said automatically, even as part of her brain was already calculating what this money could mean. No more triple shifts. Time to practice. Time to breathe. Yes, you can. You earned it. That performance was worth 10 times this amount, honestly. Do you know that video of you playing has over 2 million views? What? Lily's head snapped up. Someone recorded it on their phone and posted it. It went viral. Classical music people are losing their minds trying to figure out who you are. Patricia Hammond has apparently been fielding calls nonstop. Rick pulled out his phone and showed her. Sure enough, there was a video titled, "Unknown Waitress Gives Performance of a Lifetime at Charity Gala." The view count was still climbing. Lily felt dizzy. She leaned against the doorframe for support. Look, Rick said, pocketing his phone. I know I'm the villain in your story. I earned that role. But I'm trying to be better. That night showed me something ugly about myself, and I can't unsee it now. My therapist says that's actually progress. He laughed, but it was hollow. I've spent my whole life building walls between myself and other people, especially people who remind me of where I came from. Where you came from? Lily asked, surprised. I grew up poor. Really poor. My dad worked construction when he could find work. We lived in a trailer park until I was 12. I put myself through community college, then transferred to a state school. Built my business from nothing. He looked around at her modest building. I know what this kind of neighborhood feels like. And I've spent 20 years running from it, pretending I was born into the world I bought my way into. This was not what Lily had expected. She'd assumed Rick was old money, born with every advantage. When I saw you in your server's uniform working hard, probably struggling to make ends meet, it reminded me of my mom. She worked 3 jobs too, died from a heart attack when she was 52, exhausted herself to death trying to give me opportunities. His voice was rough now. Instead of seeing her sacrifice and respecting it, I've spent years looking down on people in the same situation. How messed up is that? They stood in silence for a moment. Lily looked at the check in her hands, then at Rick's face. He looked different than he had at the party. Smaller somehow, more human. The armor of wealth and arrogance had cracked, revealing someone lost underneath. I don't forgive you, Lily said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did was cruel. I know. But I appreciate you coming here. And being honest, that takes something. She looked at the check again. And I'm going to keep this because you're right. I did earn it. I earned it by not letting you break me. Rick nodded. That's fair. The thing is, Lily continued, I've spent 3 years being angry. Angry at the drunk driver who killed my parents. Angry at the universe for bad timing. Angry at myself for giving up music. And that anger has been eating me alive. She took a breath. I don't want to carry any more anger. I don't have room for it. So what will you do now? Rick asked. Patricia Hammond told me Vincent Laurent won't stop calling her. He really wants you for that European tour. I don't know yet, Lily admitted. It's overwhelming. 3 days ago, I was worried about making rent. Now people are talking about recording contracts and concert tours. It feels like someone else's life. It's your life, Rick said firmly. It was always supposed to be your life. You just took a detour. He stepped back from the door. I should go. I've taken up enough of your time. But Lily, for what it's worth, I hope you take those opportunities. The world needs to hear you play. And your brother, I'm sure he'd want you to follow your dream too. He doesn't even know any of this happened, Lily said. I haven't told him yet. Why not? Because once I tell him, it becomes real, and I'll have to make a decision. Keep grinding at 3 jobs, staying safe and small, or take a risk on something that feels too big, too impossible? Rick smiled, and for the first time it looked genuine. In my experience, the impossible things are usually the ones worth doing. But that's just me. You'll figure it out. He turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Lily? That video? The comments are incredible. People crying, saying it changed their day, their week. One person said they decided not to give up on their own dreams after watching you play. You did that, just by being yourself. After he left, Lily closed the door and leaned against it. She looked around her small apartment, at the second-hand furniture and the water stain on the ceiling her landlord kept promising to fix. Then she looked at the check in her hand, at the business cards on her table, at her phone where messages from Patricia Hammond and others kept coming in. Her life was about to change. The question was whether she was brave enough to let it. She picked up her phone and pulled up her brother's number. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Then she set the phone down. Not yet. First, she needed to figure out what she was going to say. Instead, she walked to the keyboard in the corner of her apartment, a cheap digital piano she'd bought at a pawn shop years ago. She sat down and began to play, softly at first, then with growing confidence. The walls were thin and her neighbors could probably hear, but for once she didn't care. She played for herself. For her mother, for the girl she'd been and the woman she was becoming, and as her fingers moved across the keys, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Outside her window, the sun was setting over the city. Tomorrow would bring decisions and phone calls and impossible choices. But tonight, there was just the music, filling her small apartment with possibility. The coffee shop was busy with the lunch crowd, but Lily had managed to snag a corner table away from the noise. Her brother Daniel sat across from her, looking confused about why she'd suddenly asked him to fly home for the weekend. He'd been worried something was wrong, probably thinking someone was sick or there was some kind of emergency. So what's going on? Daniel asked, studying her face. You sounded weird on the phone. Is everything okay? Lily had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in her head over the past week. She'd imagined different ways to tell him, different reactions he might have. But now that he was actually sitting here, all those prepared speeches evaporated from her mind. I need to show you something, she said, pulling out her phone. She found the video and slid it across the table. Daniel watched, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to complete shock. When the video ended, he looked up at her with wide eyes. That's you. That's really you playing? At a party last week. It's kind of a long story. Lily, this has over 3 million views now. 3 million! People in the comments are calling you a genius. There's articles about you. Someone made a compilation of reactions to your playing. He scrolled frantically through his phone. Wait, is this why Patricia Hammond from the Metropolitan Orchestra has been mentioned in connection with your name? I saw something about it, but I thought it was a different person. It's me, Lily confirmed quietly. Daniel set down his phone, really looking at his sister now. Why didn't you tell me about this immediately? This is huge. This is like life-changing huge. Because I needed to think about some things first. Lily took a deep breath. Danny, I need to tell you the truth about something. About a lot of things, actually. Over the next 20 minutes, she laid it all out. The 3 jobs she'd been working. How tight money had really been. The sacrifices she'd made to keep him in medical school. How she'd deposited Rick's check and how many opportunities were suddenly piling up. Offers she'd been too afraid to even consider. Daniel's face went through a series of emotions. Shock first, then guilt, then something that looked almost like anger. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice tight. All this time I thought we were doing fine. I thought the insurance money was enough. You let me believe that. Because you needed to focus on school. You're going to be a doctor, Danny. That was Mom and Dad's dream for you. What about your dreams? Daniel's voice rose slightly, drawing a few glances from nearby tables. He lowered it again, but the intensity remained. Do you think Mom and Dad would have wanted you to give up everything for me? Do you think I want that? You're younger. You have more time to... Stop it, Daniel interrupted. Just stop. I'm not a kid anymore, Lily. I'm 25 years old. You've been treating me like I'm still 19, like I need to be protected from reality. He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. I would have taken a year off. I would have gotten loans. I would have figured something out if I'd known you were drowning. Lily felt tears prickling at her eyes. I wasn't drowning. I was managing. You were working yourself to death, just like Mom did. Daniel's voice cracked on those last words. You know what the worst part is? You became exactly what killed her, working 3 jobs, never resting, sacrificing everything. And for what? So I could go to school without guilt? Well, guess what? I feel guilty anyway. I feel guilty that my sister gave up Juilliard and I didn't even know it. The words hit Lily like a physical blow. She'd never thought about it that way. She'd been so focused on protecting Daniel, on honoring their parents' wishes, that she hadn't considered she might be repeating their mother's mistakes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. Daniel reached across the table and grabbed her hand. I know you did. You always do. You've been taking care of me since Mom and Dad died, and I love you for that. But Lily, it's my turn now. You need to let me help you for once. How? You're in medical school. You have your own life to worry about. I have loans I can take out. I have scholarship opportunities I haven't pursued because I didn't think I needed them. And honestly, he smiled a little. After watching that video, after seeing what you can do, I think I need to step up my game. You're out here going viral and I'm just trying to pass my anatomy exams. Lily laughed despite her tears. Your anatomy exams are important. Yeah, but they're not viral video important. Daniel squeezed her hand. Listen to me. Vincent Laurent wants you for a European tour. Do you understand how insane that is? That's like Beyoncé calling and asking you to open for her. You can't say no to that. But the money, your tuition, is handled. Rick's check covers 2 years, you said. That gives us time to figure out the rest. And honestly, once you're touring and recording, you'll probably make enough that we'll both be fine. He grinned. I fully expect you to be rich and famous and buy me a fancy car someday. Danny, I'm serious. So am I. Lily, you have to do this. Not for me, not for Mom and Dad, but for you. When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Lily couldn't answer because she genuinely couldn't remember. Exactly, Daniel said. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Patricia Hammond back. You're going to say yes to whatever opportunities make sense. And you're going to stop worrying about me. Because I'm going to be fine. Better than fine. I'm going to be great. But I can't be great knowing that you gave up your dreams for me. They sat in silence for a moment, just holding hands across the table like they used to when they were kids and things got scary. What if I fail? Lily asked quietly. What if I'm not as good as they think I am? That performance at the party, maybe it was just luck. Maybe— Stop, Daniel interrupted gently. Lily, I watched that video a dozen times. That wasn't luck. That was years of talent and training and heart. You're scared, I get it. But you can't let fear stop you from living. A middle-aged woman approached their table hesitantly. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but are you the pianist from the video? The one at the charity gala? Lily froze, unsure how to respond. This was the first time someone had recognized her in public. She is. Daniel answered for her, beaming with pride. The woman's face lit up. I just wanted to say thank you. I watched your performance during a really difficult time. I'd been thinking about giving up on something important to me. Something I've wanted my whole life. But watching you play, seeing how much emotion and courage that took, it inspired me to keep trying. Her eyes were misty. You changed something in me that day. I just wanted you to know that. Before Lily could respond, the woman had walked away, leaving them both stunned. See? Daniel said softly. That's what you do. You change people. You make them feel things. That's not something you can fake or get lucky with. That's who you are. Later that evening, Lily sat in her apartment with her phone in her hand. She'd pulled up Patricia Hammond's number and had been staring at it for 10 minutes. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Everything Daniel had said made sense. The woman in the coffee shop had nearly made her cry. Even Rick's unexpected visit and apology had shown her that people could change, could grow, could become better versions of themselves. Maybe it was her turn to become a better version of herself too. She thought about her mother, about all those hours spent at the piano together. Her mom used to say that music was a gift meant to be shared, not hidden away. If you have light inside you, she'd say, you have a responsibility to let it shine. Lily had been hiding her light for 3 years, convincing herself it was the responsible thing to do. But maybe the truly responsible thing was to live fully, to pursue her purpose, to show her brother that dreams were worth fighting for. She pressed the call button before she could change her mind. Patricia answered on the second ring. Lily, I was hoping I'd hear from you. Please tell me you've thought about Vincent's offer. I have, Lily said, her voice surprisingly steady. And I want to say yes. To all of it. The tour, the recording opportunity, everything. I'm ready. She could hear Patricia's smile through the phone. Oh, my dear, that is wonderful news. Vincent will be thrilled. We have so much to discuss. When can you come to my office? We need to talk contracts, schedules, logistics. As Patricia rattled off details, Lily walked to her window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, thousands of people had watched her play. Some of them had been moved to tears. Some had been inspired to chase their own dreams. And here she was, finally brave enough to chase hers. Patricia, Lily interrupted gently. Thank you. For seeing something in me. For giving me this chance, darling. I didn't give you anything. You earned this the moment your fingers touched those keys. I'm just helping you get to where you were always meant to be. After they hung up, Lily sat down at her cheap keyboard one more time. But she didn't play sadly tonight. Didn't play for what she'd lost. She played for what was coming. For concert halls and recording studios and audiences who would hear her story through her music. She played for the future. And for the first time in 3 years, she could actually see one. Outside her window, the city hummed with life and possibility. Tomorrow she would start the hard work of becoming who she was meant to be. But tonight she just played free and unafraid, finally ready to let her light shine. 6 months had passed, and Lily stood backstage at Royal Albert Hall in London, one of the most prestigious concert venues in the world. Her hands were trembling slightly as she adjusted her concert gown, a deep blue dress that Patricia had insisted she needed for tonight's performance. Through the heavy curtains, she could hear the murmur of 3,000 people taking their seats. 3,000 people, coming to hear her play. A stagehand gave her a 5-minute warning, and Lily took several deep breaths to steady herself. So much had happened in such a short time. The whirlwind of contract negotiations, interviews, rehearsals with Vincent Laurent's orchestra. She'd spent 2 months in intense preparation, working with some of the finest musicians in the world. They'd toured through Paris, Vienna, and Berlin. Each performance had been nerve-wracking and exhilarating in equal measure. But tonight was different. Tonight her brother Daniel was in the audience, having flown in from his medical school break. And somewhere in that crowd, in a seat he'd purchased himself in the regular section rather than the VIP area, was Rick Blackwell. She'd been surprised when Patricia mentioned he'd bought a ticket. Over the past 6 months, Rick had stayed in touch, but always at a respectful distance. He'd send the occasional text asking how the tour was going, or share an article about her performances. He'd apparently also been making changes in his own life. Daniel had done some digging and found out Rick had quietly sold his massive mansion and moved to a more modest home. He'd started a foundation providing music education to kids from low-income families, putting significant money behind it. You're going to be amazing, a voice said behind her. Vincent Laurent, the conductor who'd taken a chance on her that night at the party, stood there with an encouraging smile. I've been doing this for 40 years, and I can tell you with certainty that you're one of the most gifted pianists I've ever worked with. Not because of your technical skill, though that's exceptional, but because of what you bring to the music. Heart, soul, truth. I'm terrified, Lily admitted. Good. That means you care. The day you stop being nervous before a performance is the day you should retire. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Your mother would be so proud of you. You know that, right? Lily nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying and ruining her makeup. The stagehand returned. 2 minutes, Miss Chen, this was it. The moment that would define whether the viral video had been a fluke or the beginning of something real. Lily walked toward the stage entrance, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She could hear the orchestra tuning their instruments, that familiar, discordant sound that somehow always made her heart soar. As she stepped onto the stage, the applause was immediate and thunderous. The lights were bright, making it impossible to see individual faces in the audience, which was probably for the best. She made her way to the piano, a magnificent Steinway that gleamed under the stage lights. Lily sat down, adjusted the bench slightly, and placed her hands on the keys. The concert hall fell silent. In that moment before the music began, she thought about everything that had led her here. Her mother's patient teaching, her father's encouragement, the accident that changed everything. 3 years of survival mode, of putting dreams on hold, that night at Rick's party. when humiliation had somehow transformed into opportunity. Daniel's fierce insistence that she stop sacrificing herself. The leap of faith it took to say yes to this life. Then she began to play. She started with the same piece she'd played that night at the gala, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. But this time she had a full orchestra behind her, their instruments weaving together with her piano to create something magnificent. The music filled every corner of the vast hall, powerful and delicate, technically precise yet emotionally raw. As she played, Lily forgot about the audience, forgot about her nerves, forgot about everything except the conversation happening between her fingers and the keys. This was why she'd been born. This was her purpose, her calling, the thing she was meant to do with her one precious life. The piece built and swelled, the orchestra rising with her, following Vincent's skilled direction. In the audience, Daniel sat with tears streaming down his face, watching his sister finally claim the life she deserved. A few rows behind him, Rick sat very still, barely breathing, understanding for the first time what real beauty looked like. Not the fake glamour of expensive parties and designer labels, but this, the courage to be vulnerable in front of thousands, the discipline of years of practice, the generosity of sharing your gift with the world. When the first piece ended, the applause was deafening. But Lily wasn't done. She transitioned into the improvisation she'd become known for, taking the classical structure and making it her own. She wove in modern elements, jazz influences, unexpected harmonies that made the audience lean forward in their seats. Some people gasped at her bold choices, others smiled in delight. This was the gift her mother had always talked about. Not just the ability to play the notes correctly, but the courage to add your own voice to the conversation, to respect tradition while also pushing boundaries, to honor the composers who came before while also saying something new. The performance lasted nearly an hour, with several pieces showcasing both her technical mastery and her artistic vision. By the time she played the final notes, there wasn't a dry eye in the building. The audience erupted to their feet, the standing ovation lasting so long that Lily had to bow multiple times. Flowers were brought to the stage. People were shouting "Brava!" Some held up their phones, capturing this moment to share with others who couldn't be here. Backstage after the performance, Lily was surrounded by well-wishers and industry people eager to work with her. But she kept scanning the crowd for the faces that mattered most. Daniel reached her first, practically tackling her in a hug. "That was incredible. I knew you were good, but Lily, that was next level. Mom and Dad were definitely watching tonight. I could feel it." They held each other for a long moment. Two orphaned kids who'd somehow made it through to the other side of grief. Patricia appeared with champagne and a knowing smile. "The reviews are already coming in online. They're calling you a revelation. Vincent wants to extend the tour through next year. And there are at least 5 recording labels fighting over who gets to sign you." Lily laughed, overwhelmed by it all. "Can I just enjoy tonight before we start planning the next year?" "Of course, darling. You've earned that." As the crowd began to thin, Lily spotted Rick hanging back near the doorway, looking unsure whether he should approach. She excused herself and walked over to him. "Hi," he said simply. "That was extraordinary. Thank you for putting me on the guest list. I wasn't sure if you'd want me here." "I wasn't sure either," Lily admitted. "But I'm glad you came." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, Rick spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about that night at my house. About the person I was then. I'm not going to lie and say I'm completely different now.